You have now entered the no friend zone. You have now entered the no friend zone. Shalom, shalom, family. Giving all praise to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to our ancestors. We want to get it in this morning. Starting a new project called the No Fringe Zone. Come on in, family. Hit that like button. Like, share, and subscribe. Let everybody know, man, we're going to have a real discussion this morning. We're exposing the pseudoscience, the fringe scholarship that's running rapid, not just in the conscious community, but in this, that includes this false Kemetic science teaching, which is pseudoscience, this fringe scholarship that people are pushing as truth. We got major platforms like HOK and Sinetta bent on pushing pseudoscience to our people. Something that they try to link back to an ancient knowledge and culture, which they can't do. We don't see any real Kemetic science until the 60s. You really don't see a lot of that stuff until you get to Aleister Crowley, who's the real pharaoh of these modern day Kemetic priests. So-called Kemetic priest out here. This cultic mysticism. We're going to deal with that as well. And some of them have PhDs, like Richard Carrier. It's nothing more than a fringe scholar. We're going to prove that today. And then you have his acolytes here in the community, like Chris Harris. But we have to realize that these arguments, simply because the more intelligent people view this, the more studied people view this, the more tenured people view this as nothing more than fringe views, scholarships, things that are in the minority. But my grandfather used to tell me this, and I've said this time before. My grandfather used to say to me, the wheel that squeaks the loudest is the one that gets the oil. So what am I saying here? A lot of these conversations and debates that take place, a lot of this pseudoscience and that find popularity in this pseudo-conscious community, especially over on Sinetta's channel on HOK, it's a very, very, you can't even call it a minimalist point of view. You can't even call it that. It's well so under the minority of people who actually believe this pseudoscience, this fringe scholarship. And we're going to really get into it. A fringe theorist is the more apropos term to use. These are fringe theorists. It's their hypothesis. This is why they fool the people. They come into a discussion, or they come into a debate, or they give a presentation, or they come on their YouTube channels, think they fooling us. You're not fooling us. Just because you sipping coffee in the morning don't mean you ain't sipping tea. You ain't fooling us. It's fringe theorists, fringe theories. And we're going to get into that, and we're going to show you why that is, because you're going to see clearly all of their arguments, especially those of the likes of Chris Harris, who likes to consistently attack Hebrew Israelites, Christians, which I don't really have a dog in that fight to a degree when we understand what we mean by Christian or modern day Christianity. But you have to understand that these people are not creating or developing these ideas based on their own wisdom and knowledge and understanding as they present to the people as if they're a cut above the rest. You're just one of the mythicists or pseudo scholars in the bucket. There's many of you. And you recycle the same arguments year after year after year after year after year after year. If you repeat, the easiest way to develop a habit is to repeat something for, they say, at least 30 days. At least 30 days. Shalom, Judah. Appreciate you being here. Peace to you, Stephen. Like, this is what we have to understand when we talk about French scholarship. So I'm not going to beleaguer the time we're talking. I'm just going to get right into it. And this is not, for me, this is not a show whether or not you want to believe that Jesus Christ is a historical figure or not. I want to make that clear. But what I want to expose is where people are grabbing this information without giving credit to the authors of this information in this community. They're nothing more than mythicists, French scholars who plagiarize other people's work. This is why they come into debates with no sources. And they sound as if they're giving this information off the dome, off the top of their head. But they're plagiarizing. They're plagiarizing. They're literally, in most instances, taking word for word what these other mythicists or French scholars are doing and saying and writing about, and presenting it in a community, in this conscious community, as if it's their own. And this is what we have to call out. So this is the part that I'm dealing with today. The French scholars, the mythicists, the French theories they present, and the plagiarism. This is what I'm going to show today. And specifically dealing with, first, I'm going to go down the line, not all in one show, but I'm going to first deal with Chris Harris. Then we're going to deal with Shaka Amos, or Almost, Almost, Shaka Almost, Jababel Osazi, because he never brings any sources. It's all babble, vain babbling. Jababel Osaze. And then the greatest pseudo of them all, Seti or Sarah pseudo Seti. Gonna deal with those four fringe theorists because that's all they are. That's all they are. And so let's get into this. Let's show this information. I'm going to get right into it. Just let me share my screen. And you guys tell me if what you see in what I read to you today is simply plagiarism at its best. But let's deal with this. This is an up and coming debate, I believe, that Chris Harris is supposed to be having with William Bennett. I don't care. I'm gonna try to torpedo this garbage any chance I get. But we're gonna hear a lot of the stuff where they come up with this foolishness, right? And if you really want to know what Chris Harris has studied, he'll say he reads many books, right? And he'll flash a book, but he's not reading these entire books, and he's not sharing it with the people. He'll read a passage here, maybe a cut there, but he's not reading these entire books. But we're going to deal with this source information here really quickly. And this is from Brill. This is Journal for the Study of the Historical Jesus, right? 2017. And this is an excerpt from this paper from Daniel N. Galata, right? He's a professor at Stanford University. Pages 310 to 346 from this. And what he does is he goes into Richard Carrier's argument against the historicity of, some say, Jesus or Yeshua or Yahushua, whatever, right? And he goes into Richard Carrier's main points in his argument against the historicity of Christ. And he does this systematically, and he goes point for point. The major points, the major tenets of this writing on Richard Carrier. And what you'll start to see is that clearly we see, especially those who are part of this mysticist movement, right, where they not only dismiss the historical Jesus, right, and that's fine, but they also now dismiss the Torah, the kings and the prophets of Israel and Judah, the archaeology, the history, the science. We start to see all of this. And clearly what happens is that they're plagiarizing this information and passing it off on their own. They're remixing it and serving it back out to the people as if they're intelligent. But yet, they want to make a claim and an argument that the Hebrew Bible is stolen from ancient Kemet, that it plagiarized the instructions of Amenhotep in the book of Proverbs. This is the ignorance that we have to deal with in this community, but we're going to deal with it today. But let's deal with it, right? Let's see who Chris Harris' daddy is today. This is what we're going to do. So on Richard Carrier's doubts, a response to Richard Carrier's on the historicity of Jesus, why we might have reason for doubt. Daniel N. Galata, Stanford University. Here's the abstract we're going to start with. The Jesus myth theory is the view that the person known as Jesus of Nazareth had no historical existence. Throughout the centuries, this view has had a few but notable adherents, such as Bruno Bauer, Arthur Drews, G.A. Wells, and Robert M. Price. Recently, Richard Carrier's work on the historicity of Jesus has attempted to examine the question in a rigorous academic fashion. According to Carrier, within the early days of Christianity, Jesus was not understood as a historic human figure. This is the rhetoric we hear from Chris Harris all the time on his Sipping the Tea channel. This is what we hear all the time. But he makes no reference to any type of source or historical methodology as to why he makes this assumption, right? But what he does is he goes into Richard Carrier's work and reiterates it, mixes it up, which is nothing more than mosaic plagiarism. We're going to get into the definition of that because we need to learn that term and that understanding of what we hear from a lot of these fringe and pseudo scholars, right? Especially those these false Kemetic priests out here, right? Shalom, Yatsan. So let's deal with it, right? And like I said, my argument today is not whether or not Christ was a historical figure or not. I'm talking about the pseudoscience, the fringe theories, ideas, the mysticism, and the plagiarism that's passed off in this community through people like Chris Harris as knowledge. And it's truth. That's the part that I'm dealing with. The part is truth. So let's continue. It says Jesus was not understood as a historical figure, but rather a celestial angelic being, akin to Gabriel in Islam or to Moroni in Mormonism, and only came to be understood as a historical person later. While Carrier's hypothesis, did y'all right off the bat, this is hypothetical. This is hypothesis. In other words, already they're telling us, and we understand, Carrier also understands that himself, that he can't prove this. He can't prove this. This is why Chris Harris could never win this debate intellectually and honestly against Pastor Bennett or anyone else, because he's only building on a hypothesis, a hypothetical. You can't prove it. There's no evidence to prove any of your claims when it comes to the historical Jesus. You can't prove it. Let's continue. It says, while Carrier's hypothesis is problematic and unpersuasive, there are several key points related to his work that this article specifically challenges and critiques. And when it's talking about the specific points, it's talking about the major tenets of his argument, this mythicism that prevails in these arguments with these pseudoscience, right? And the problem is, a lot of times, a lot of these things that they're arguing have already been debunked. They've already been debunked and destroyed. But what happens is, oftentimes we allow them to slide by throwing a bunch of scriptures at it instead of dealing with the actual work that they're citing, right? And so the works that they're citing are pseudo. It's pseudoscience, which is another term for fringe theories. These hypotheses are nothing more than pseudoscience. And we continue to see this. So let's deal with it. There are several key points related to the work in this article that specifically challenge and critiques, right? So let's get into this, right? But let me read this footnote here. It says the author would like to express his thanks to the numerous scholars who assisted in the preparation of this response article, particularly Hector Avalos, Matthew C. Baldwin, Roland Bohr, James G. Crossley, Bart D. Ehrman, who himself is a proclaimed atheist, right? Bart D. Ehrman, Ian J. Elmer, Craig A. Evans, Larry Hurtado, Simone J. Johnson, Fergus J. King, M. David Litwa, Dale B. Martin, James F. McGrath, Hugo Mendez, Robert Miles, Judy Stack Nelson, Robert E. Van Orst, and we're going to hear a lot from Robert E. Van Orst, right? He's one of the most prolific PhD scholars when it comes to this topic on the historical evidence of Jesus. This is what I mean about these guys. Chris Harris, who says Israelites never existed. I don't believe none of the kings of Israel ever existed. It's all fake. It's made up. It's fictitious. Fictitious. You're a liar. You're a liar. Because no scholar in the field, not a consensus or majority of the scholars in the field, agrees with what you're saying. So what evidence is it that you have that they don't have? Where are you winning in this scholastic conversation with the scholars who've done the work? Where are you winning with this? You're not. Let me just do this real quick for the family. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to drop this link down in here. Shalom, KOT. Right? Robert Vorst, Chris Tilley, Mayor J.C. Warren, Kenneth L. Waters, and numerous others. Right? He would like. He says, I would like to also express his gratitude towards the faculty of Yale University Divinity School and Stanford University for their counsel. Now we hear Jababel on HOK talking about his. I believe he claims now that he has a degree in divinity from Cornell University. So now we have Yale and Stanford University scholars saying that the things that you guys are saying is nothing more than pseudoscience and fringe scholarship. Like, we got to stop letting these guys slide with this. And so he goes on and on and on and on and on. Right? So let's continue here. Right? Keywords: historical Jesus, Jesus myth theory, Christ myth theory, historicity of Jesus, Jesus existent, Christian origins, right? The quest for the mythical Jesus, right? It says, in recent years, a growing number of lay people have developed an interest in the question of whether or not Jesus of Nazareth existed as a historical person. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Constant Francois Volney, Charles Francois Dubois, and Bruno Shalakia Bauer all advocated for the theory that Jesus did not exist as a historical person. So again, you don't get this argument about the historical Jesus well until the mid to late 18th century to 19th century. So we're almost 2,000 years after his death that no one ever even makes this claim that he wasn't a real person. That's the first red flag we have to take into account when we're having this particular discussion. But we got to deal with these fake and phony people here, right? We got to deal with these fake Chris Harrises and where they get their information from, because that's what I'm here for, to expose you guys to the fact of where they're getting their information from and why they're failing at it, because their information has already been debunked. And this is what we have to bring out and show the people, right? So it says, while their arguments fail to convince the academy, their questions have persisted and inspired a new movement within North America, which also argues that Jesus did not exist. Originally known as the Christ myth theory, this is all Chris Harris argues day in and day out. And because he argues this fringe theory day in and day out, this Christ myth theory, he has to, he can't help but lead him back to the Torah in the Hebrew Bible and say none of it existed. None of it was real. All of it was fake. He has to say that because this is the tenet and the practice that he follows. This is the pseudoscience that he lives by. This Christ myth theory. So he can't just throw out a bit of it. He has to throw it all out based on pseudoscience. And it's pseudoscience because there's no evidence to support the hypothesis. None. Right? It says, so this school of thought has more recently adopted the moniker Jesus myth theory or mythicism. And this is what I'm saying. Chris Harris is nothing more than a mythicist. He's a mythicist, just like Aleister Crowley. These guys are mythicists. Jabari, he's a Kemetic mythicist. They're fringe theorists at best. At best. Those who support this theory call themselves mythicists and label those who maintain the view that Jesus did exist as a historical human person as historists. Let's continue. Much like the various reconstructions of the historical Jesus, it must be stressed that there is no single Jesus myth theory. There are many mythicists out here with many different theories. So which one is Chris Harris proving? There are many. Which one does he hold to? We're going to see. As Bart D. Ehrman rightly emphasizes, some of them rival the Da Vinci Code. Just complete fiction. But Chris Harris constantly says, oh, the Hebrew Bible doesn't exist. None of those kings existed. None of that stuff ever happened. The Bible was made up. For what purpose? He said the Greeks created it. Are the Greeks in power today? Their civilization didn't last. Like these are ridiculous arguments that these guys are making. In their passion for conspiracy. This is what Bart Ehrman says. And he's an atheist. He says, as Bart D. Ehrman rightly emphasizes, some of them rival the Da Vinci Code in their passion for conspiracy and their shallowness of their historical knowledge, not just of the New Testament and early Christianity, but of ancient religions generally, and even more broadly, the ancient world. He says these guys that follow this type of thinking always twist history. They don't understand history. They'll lie and deceive about what the history is actually telling us. So the moment they open their mouths and tell you Christianity, right, or the Hebrew Bible was only delivered to us by the Greeks, it's Greek mythos, these guys are lying. They're dismissing all of the, but then they'll turn around and tell you, oh, look, the Sajarran Treaty is seen in Deuteronomy chapter 28. They stole that from the Assyrians. Well, which one is it? Did we steal it from the Assyrians, or or was it stolen from ancient Kemet? Or they just put the Bible together and they just stole from everybody? Is that the argument? Is that the mythicist argument you're having? Because if you take that road, you're dead. And in more recent times, I myself been pulling my punches, trying to be more amicable to these guys and how they present their information and what information they're presenting so that we can have an actual honest and scholastic information. But you can't do that with dumbasses. You can't do it with liars. You can't do it with people who have no intentions on delivering a truthful thought or presenting the truthful thought to the people. This is why they're seemingly so hard to debate, or they can't be defeated in debate. How do you debate against a lie? We can present truth all day, and if you got an idiot standing in front of you saying, nope, that didn't exist, nope, that never happened, nope, that didn't exist. I would never forget I was in a discussion with Jababo Osazi, and I asked Jababo, are there any PhD scholars who say Moses existed? And the reason why I asked him that, because in our dialogue, he says no PhD scholar says Moses ever existed. So when I gave him Douglas Petrovich, a PhD scholar who's done extensive work on the historical Moses and his existence, I asked Jabari, have you ever heard of him? He says, yes. I said, so then why did you say there's no scholar that supports the historical existence of Moses? I said, do you not agree with him? The only thing he does is he just shakes his head. I said, I thought you said there were no scholars. Why did you just tell me you knew there was one? Douglas Petrovich, a PhD. Why did you say you knew of him? But then you just told the people there's not one scholar that agrees with the historical Moses. Because you're a lying mythicist. You're a snake oil salesman, a con artist. This is what I'm saying about you can't have a real discussion with these guys about what history actually teaches, what scholars are actually saying, and what they're telling you. Jababo had a discussion not too long ago with Sister Natalie. Shout out to Queen Natalie and FOP, and shout out to her husband. Clearly, he proved no evidence that Hathor, first of all, that Hathor was not a Canaanite deity, although the sister presented more evidence to support her argument than Jabari did to support his argument that Hathor is a Canaanite deity. We also took her to a source. She also took her to a source in JSTOR. There's also a source we read out of Haaretz, who are quoting the archaeologists who's telling us that the deity of Hathor was taken into Egypt by the Canaanite people. The deity was taken into Egypt, not the other way around. As we heard Silly Sinetta say the other day, trying to defend this BS. And then try to make it out as if the sister doesn't have good reading comprehension. The problem is she read too well. And then you guys had to go on the wino tour to try to discredit what she's had to say. Like, this is ridiculous. And then you have people coming in, well, why her husband let her come up there? He let her come up there and present proper information. Now, you don't have to agree with her source, but you can't deny that it says what it says it said, Jabari. Or, excuse me, Jababu. You can't do it. When you present no information and then your claim to fame is, oh, I went into her source and I told her what I thought it meant. But you presented no sources of your own, Jababu. It's ridiculous. But let me continue. It says, but of ancient, he says, but of ancient, this is Dr. Bart D. Ehrman talking about how these mythicists like Chris Harris are nothing but frauds and fakes and liars when it comes to this information. He says some of them rival the Da Vinci Code. Nothing more than a fiction, a tale of fiction in a Hollywood movie. He says in their passion for conspiracy and the shallowness, that's big. The shallowness, they're empty. They have nothing of their historical knowledge, not just of the New Testament and early Christianity, but of ancient religions generally, and even more broadly, the ancient world. In the tradition of Volney and Dupuis, authors such as D.M. Murdoch, aka Akira S., and if people don't know who D.M. Murdoch is, this is one of the persons responsible for the whole Zeitgeist movement, the whole Zeitgeist film. They use D.M. Murdoch, which is a pseudonym. That tells you something right there. But that's a pseudonym for the pseudoscience she put out there. Chris Harris brought that to me in the debate. This is where we get all of the dying. This is one of the persons. Now, she's not the origin, but she's the one that made it popular. The dying and rising saviors myth that we always hear Chris Harris spout over on over there dealing with them HOKs. HOEK is what I say. He's always talking about the dying myths of the rising saviors, and can we see parallels? The hell no, you can't. He tried to bring that crap to me in the debate, and he had to pivot. He had to get right up off of it. This is the D.M. Murdoch. This is all this mythicist argument, this Christ myth argument that they use to not only attack Christianity, but they use it to attack the Hebrew Bible because they figure out they can't separate the two when they're making these arguments, whether or not to determine who's a historical person or not. If you want to know where that dying and rising savior stuff became popular, start reading D.M. Murdoch, Akira S., and then go into the people that have actually debunked every piece of information in that zeitgeist rhetoric that she made popular. It's been demolished and destroyed. All that Jesus and Horus and Osiris, December 25th crap, all of that. He was a resurrection deity. No, he wasn't. All of that terminology came into existence and came into play after the Christ narrative was created. It's easily shown and proven. There's nowhere in any coffin text. There's nowhere in any ulterior text, pyramid text that will tell you that Osar or Osiris was raising people from the dead. Oh, he was a vegetation god. The fact of the matter, the reason why he was green didn't represent vegetation. It represented the fact that he was a corpse rotting in hell. And when he died. He never leaves the underworld. And then once you start asking these people, what time period are they getting these stories from? Because a lot of what they're arguing was written after the Christian narrative was written. After the Hebrew Bible was in existence. You don't even find a codified, you don't even have a codified, listen to me carefully, a codified book or what they call laws or codified book of Mayat until the 7th century BC. Till 700 BCE. You don't even get it until that time. When we know already we have an established Torah in existence. We have a codified law in existence already. So our codified law predates the codified law of Mayat. And I dare any one of you to challenge me on that. Like, we have to understand, like, these guys are not, they are not real scholars. They're parrots. It says, and Tom Harper hypothesized that the fictional life of Jesus was completely influenced by Greco-Roman mystery cults and mythological figures such as Horus, Osiris, Hercules, Attis, and Mithras. That's Chris Harris all day. This is where he gets this crap. From these people right here. This is where he gets it from. I already exposed this to him on this already, but I'm gonna keep doing it. This is where this argument comes from. None of these people lived during the time of Christ. None of these people lived during the time of the church fathers. This stuff only came about in the 1900s. These clowns right here came up with this hypothesis. This theory that the fictional life of Jesus was completely influenced by Greco-Roman mystery cults and mythological figures such as Horus, Osiris, Hercules, Attis, and Mithras. This is what Jabari and Chris Harris, who now seem to be joined at the hip like little Siamese twins. Well, more likely Chris Harris is joining at Jabari's ankle since he got to look up to kiss his ass. This is where this stuff comes from. Similarly, Timothy Fricke and Peter Gandy argue that the Jesus story was a Jewish version of the so-called perennial myth of the dying and resurrecting God-man. That's another mythicist argument. Joseph Atwell promotes the idea of a conspiracy theory in which Jesus was a literary invention created by the Flavians. We hear that from the morons all the time in the community. Oh, just Flavor Josephus made that up. And so they're mixing all of these mythicist arguments together as if they're speaking facts, but they're all hypotheticals. There's no evidence to support their claims. This is why it's considered an hypothesis, a fringe theory. That's it. Again, Joseph Atwell promotes the idea of a conspiracy theory in which Jesus was a literary invention created by the Flavians with the aid of Josephus, designed to pacify the Jewish population so as to prevent further rebellion after the siege of Jerusalem. Now we have Chris Harris arguing all that. Even makes no sense in and of itself. We have Chris Harris arguing all the time. How come Josephus never mentions Jesus? How come he never mentions Jesus? But you got this moron here, Atwell, saying that Jesus was created to ease the Jewish people, but he never mentions them. What sense does that make? These people have no evidence for their claims, family. None at all whatsoever. And so this is what we got to do. Shalom, Floridian. Leonard, Judah, I see you, fam. Shalom. Shalom to Mighty Hebrew, man.
Shalom to our great elder, bro. Shalom to JJ7000, man. I see you in the building, family.
Shalom, family. Let's continue. We're talking about fringe scholarship. Fringe scholarship. It says these are but a sampling of the various theories that have been promoted. Though different, what unites these Jesus myth theories is the view that Jesus as a historical person within human history did not exist. This is what I'm talking about. This argument of whether or not a historical Jesus could have ever existed or did not exist is only their leading argument to say that you can't rely on the Torah because you can't rely on those such as Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You can't rely on the prophets. You can't rely on them because there is, as well as are not historical, based on the same criteria that they claim that Christ is not historical. So this is why they're really trying to build this particular argument. So destroying is not this argument whether or not he was a historical person. Fine, if he is not. I don't believe that he was God. That's a Christian argument. We're not talking about the Christian argument or whether or not Jesus was God. He was not God. But the historicity of the figure, the historical evidences of the figure is what they have to attack, because once they attack that, then they have a whole premise they can say, well, none of these guys there existed. Even with this silly argument, oh no, they're just eponymous ancestors. The forefathers was just eponymous ancestors. Doesn't mean that they weren't real people. And I don't know why we keep allowing these people, these unconscious people in this community, to continue to use this term and phraseology. It's pseudoscience. It's fringe scholarship. They're fringe theorists. It says, given the fringe status of these theories, the vast majority have remained unnoticed and unaddressed within scholarly circles. The consensus of scholars say you're nuts. They don't even address you morons. They don't even address the fact whether or not Jesus was his historical figure. But what they try to do is say, well, you have to talk about the historical figure of the Bible because did he walk on water? Did he open the blinded eyes? I don't give a damn. That has nothing to do about whether or not are we talking about a real life flesh and blood person. I was telling a brother the other day, was having this conversation. He was saying, well, do you believe Jesus did that? Listen, I don't have nothing to do with it. I don't believe none of that Grecian oil that they slathered over it. You know, like that Kemetic oil, Jababo Saze, and Shaka Almost, ALMOST, be slathering all over the coffin text and Kemetic text and Kemetic history. That oil, that Grecian oil that they slathered all over the New Testament. You have to understand what it is that's being taught and what's being said. Let me continue. All these guys have been determined to be fringe scholars, fringe theorists. Given the fringe status of these theories, the vast majority have remained unnoticed and unaddressed within scholarly circles. In the rare instances where these theories have been addressed, they are predominantly countered by self-confessed and typically evangelical Christian apologists and scholars. Right? So let's continue. Some of the more popular versions of the Jesus myth theory have been directly challenged by New Testament scholars such as Maurice Gago, Shirley Jackson Case, James D. Gunn, Morton Smith, R.T. Franz, Robert E. Van Voorst, Susan M. Elliott, and most recently Maurice Casey, Bart D. Ehrman, James A. McGrath, Candida Moss, and Joel Bannon. Despite the fact that most professional academics reject mythicism, which is where we find Chris Harris always operating and debating out of that field of understanding, that mythicism, right? Interest into the theory has not subsided. Casey and Ehrman ascribe this to some atheist activists' disdain for organized religion, especially the Christian tradition, and the increase of online and independent publishing platforms. Interest in mythicism has also been amplified by internet conspiracy culture, HOK, Sonetta. And let me say this: I don't really hold anything against Sonetta about him not being knowledgeable. I know Sonetta is dumb as a box of rocks, to be honest. He's knowledgeable about what he's knowledgeable about, and that's video cameras and shit. I don't have a problem with that. He's better than me than that. I don't expect him to be able to get in the ring and go toe-to-toe with me. He's not a debater. So I don't hold that against him. So when he comes on a platform, I don't expect him to have a wealth of him to be dragging with him and pulling out his pocket a wealth of knowledge. He ain't gonna be able to give that to you. It's not him. It's not him. So I don't hold that against him when it comes to that. So when it comes to the scripture, I know he's dumb as a box of rocks. And understanding the context. When it comes to culture and history and anthropology and science, I don't expect it to be something. He's Don King. Don King never won a boxing championship in his life in the ring. He profited outside of the ring. Sonetta is a good Don King when it comes to this. I give him that. So I don't expect him to know nothing when it comes to this information. We don't know nothing. But I understand it is proper, and I understand it in the proper understanding of which he goes at the bottom. He does. Hey, look, I tell you, he don't believe in the book. He doesn't believe in the conscience of the Most High. He doesn't believe in receiving that knowledge. He doesn't believe in the spiritual understanding that we've been afforded and been blessed by the Most High to be brought into this truth. He doesn't have that. So I don't expect him to be a great scholar. You know? So when he starts talking about this stuff, all I see is the idiot bells go off. You know? That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. But despite the fact that most professional academics reject mythicism, interest in the theory has not subsided. Casey and Ehrman ascribe this to some atheist activists' disdain for organized religion, especially the Christian tradition, and increased online independent publishing platforms. Interest in mythicism has also been amplified by internet conspiracy culture, pseudoscience, and media sensationalism related to the historical Jesus and Christian origins. In short, the majority of mythicist literature is composed of wild theories, which are poorly researched, historically inaccurate, and written with a sensationalist bent for popular audiences. That's all we get from people like Chris Harris. This is all he debates from. And so this is why you never see these guys go to any other platforms. They go into places where you have the mindless and the brainless. That's where they go. They go where you have a majority of mythicist literature. It's composed with wild theories, poorly researched, historically inaccurate, and written with a sensationalism bent on for popular audiences. This is all they go to. That's the HOK chat. It's a popular audience over there. So they go where they can pass this stuff off as knowledge when they really have nothing. Let's continue. Not all mysticists are amateurs, right? So here's the overplay for the underplay for the overplay. Watch this. Not all mysticists are amateurs. Some are professionally trained historians who hold degrees in relevant fields, such as biblical studies, ancient history, and classics. Even Bar Ehrman concedes that there are a couple of bona fide scholars, not professors, teaching religious studies in universities. Okay? Teaching religious studies in universities, but scholars nonetheless. Their books may not be known to most of the general public interested in questions relating to Jesus, the Gospels, or the early Christian church, but they do occupy a noteworthy niche as a very small but often loud minority voice. And this is what I meant about my grandfather used to tell me all the time growing up. The wheel that squeaks the loudest is the one that gets the oil. Because these clowns who are in the minority, nobody really is paying attention to these morons. They find platforms like Sinetta who gives them a voice where they can speak and get real loud. Right? And so this is the things we have to consider. Let me stop that. Let me get that off the screen. Let me cancel that. Move that out the way. It says, such as biblical studies, ancient history, and classics. Even Ehrman concedes that there are a couple of bona fide scholars, not professors teaching religious studies in university, but scholars nonetheless. Their books may not be known to most of the general public, interested in questions related to Jesus, the gospel of the early Christians, right? The more noteworthy individuals include the late G.A. Wells, Earl Doherty, Price, Brody, Lassiter, and Carrier. Out of this group, Carrier's voice is currently the most prominent due to his book on the historicity of Jesus, while we might have reasons for doubt. And this is the source that Chris Harris uses every single debate. Every single debate. This is the source that he uses. You will not come to a debate on Chris Harris that Chris Harris agrees to have that you won't hear him pivot or go into this rhetoric. Taken straight from Richard Carrier's pseudo ass and passing it off on his own, as if, without giving any credit to Richard Carrier, by the way, and passing it off on his own. This is nothing more than Mosaic plagiarism. Let me show y'all something real quick. Let's define that real quick. Right? It says Mosaic plagiarism occurs when the student borrows phrases from a source without using quotation marks or fine synonyms for the author's language while keeping to the same general structure and meaning of the original. He does this all the time, right? Let's look at this also, because there's at least 4 different types of plagiarism that we see. Direct plagiarism, which is word for word, which is why their argument of plagiarism or direct plagiarism being copied, the Bible and Proverbs being copied from the instructions of Amenhotep is a poor argument because it's not word for word. It's not a direct plagiarism. You can't make that argument, right? Then you have self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism occurs when the student submits his or own previous work or mixes parts of previous works without permission from all professors involved. For example, it would be unacceptable to incorporate part of a term paper you wrote in high school into a paper assigned in a college course. Self-plagiarism also applies to submitting the same piece of work for assignments in different classes without previous permission from both professors. That's self-plagiarism. Mosaic plagiarism occurs when the student borrows phrases from a source without using quotation marks or finds synonyms, which is what they do all the time. And Chris tried to do this in that debate. See, Peter is really a Jew, and so Jew, Peter, Jupiter, Jew, Peter, whether you were joking or not, buddy. Come on, man. This is pseudoscience, right? Sometimes called patch writing. This kind of paraphrasing, and this is what they do. They paraphrase a lot of Richard Carrier's work, especially Chris Harris, and passes it off as his own, whether intentional or not. Is academically dishonest and punishable, even if you footnote your source. Like, bro, this is what he does every. It's like a single debate. And then you have what they call accidental plagiarism. Occurs when the person neglects to cite their sources or misquotes their sources, Jabari, or unintentionally paraphrases a source by using similar words, groups of words, and or a sentence structure without attribution. In other words, you're mixing up stuff, you're saying stuff, you're remixing it around, but you're not saying who you got it from. These aren't your original thoughts, Chris Harris. This is stuff you're taking directly from Richard Carrier's work. Every debate, you're going to try to do it again when you debate Pastor Bennett. You tried to do it to Zaria. You tried to do it with me. Every time you pop your head on your channel to sip some tea, this is what you do. It's plagiarism. It's plagiarism. It's academically dishonest. Academically dishonest, whether intentional or not. It's academically dishonest. Period. Period. That's why I'm saying these guys are really not to be trusted when they deliver this information. They're academically dishonest. Who is Richard Carrier? Richard Carrier is an independent scholar, like these guys tried to promote themselves as, and describes himself as a professional historian, published philosopher, and prominent defender of American free thought movement. Carrier received his Bachelor's of Art with a major in history and a minor in classical civilization from the University of California in 1987. He received a master's from Columbia University, 1998, master of philosophy in 2000, both in ancient history. Now, he's well accredited, but he's still seen as a pseudo scholar, as a fringe theorist. Why? Because the things that he makes up with no evidence to support his claim in a specific field of study. He does it in a specific field of study. He's a pseudoscience because no one agrees with him. The majority of scholars and researchers don't agree with him. He's under a minimalist position. When they come with this fringe theories and scholarship, let me show you what that is when I say this. Let's read this real quick. A fringe theory is an idea or a viewpoint which differs from the accepted, watch this, scholarship of the time within its field. Right? Fringe theories include the models and proposals of fringe science, which refers to ideas whose attributes include being highly speculative, relying on premises already refuted, Chris Harris, Jababel, Shaka Almost, Sarah Pseudo-Seti. Fringe science theories are often advanced by persons who have no traditional academic science background or by researchers outside the mainstream discipline. That's what these guys are doing. As well as the similar ideas in the areas of scholarship such as the humanities. In a narrower sense, The term fringe theory is commonly used as a pejorative. It is roughly synonymous with the term what? Pseudo-scholarship. What is pseudo-scholarship? Is a term used to describe work or a body of work that is presented as, but is not, the product of rigorous and objective study or research, the act of producing such work, or the pretend learning upon which is it based. And that's exactly what these guys do. They're pretenders. They're pretenders. Chris Harris gets, every time he comes into a debate, every show he does, everything I hear him speak about, he's pretending to be knowledgeable about the field of his time, and knowledgeable, and pretends to understand exactly what it is that's being said. You can't go into the Bible, into the first century writers, and say this is not what this is. This is what I say it is. You can't go into the Hebrew Bible and say none of these people existed when we have ample evidence, as I've proven to you over and over again, even on your own show, Sip the Tea, that the kings of Israel were real people. The kings of Judah were real people. Israel Finkelstein only argues about how large David and Solomon's kingdom may have actually been, but he never once says that they did not exist. So how do you come off with this pretend understanding, this pretend knowledge that you have the argument to say, or you have the ability to say with no evidence that they never existed and it's all fake and fictitious? You're a fringe theorist, you're a phony. And I'm strictly dealing with the information here. That's what I'm attacking. It's poor scholarship. Matter of fact, let me take that back. It's no scholarship. It's no scholarship. But we keep letting these guys get away with this because we constantly go to their channels. We constantly look at this information, this pseudoscience that they put up, and then we don't go and challenge it. Trust me, anytime you hear these guys in the discussion, anytime you hear Jababble over there on the over there on HOKs, anytime you hear Chris over there babbling off on Sip the Tea on his channel, take a few seconds and go vet their information. I guarantee you it will not say in conclusion what they're saying. It won't say it. It simply won't say it. Let's continue with this definition here. It is roughly synonymous with the term pseudoscience. Precise definitions that make distinction between widely held viewpoints, fringe theories, and pseudo-scholarship are difficult to construct because of the demarcation problem. What's the demarcation problem? In philosophy of science and epistemology, the demarcation problem is the question of how to distinguish between science and non-science. It examines the boundaries between science, pseudoscience, and other products of human activity, like art and literature and beliefs, right? So issues of false balance or false equivalencies can occur when fringe theories are presented as being equal to widely accepted theories. It is not a widely accepted theory that Christ is a myth, that Jesus was not a historical figure, that the kings of Israel and Judah did not exist, that Moses did not exist. That is not a widely held consensus. It is not. Your fringe theories at best with these arguments. Fringe theories at best. And you present this information, this crap to the people as if it's true. You can't be trusted. You can't be trusted with this information, period. Carrier claims that while he knew about the Jesus myth theory, Prior to his academic undertaking related to Jesus' historicity, he had normally ignored it for similar reasons that mainstream scholars disregarded. The turning point, watch this, people, this is crucial, for Carrier was his encounter with Earl Doherty's The Jesus Puzzle. Did Christianity begin with the mythical Christ? It was later revised and entitled Jesus, Neither God Nor Man, the Case for the Mythical Jesus in 2009. As summarized by Doherty himself, the book's central thesis is that Paul's Christ Jesus was an entirely supernatural figure crucified in the lower heavens at the hands of the demon spirits. Carrier was enthralled with Doherty's celestial Jesus theory and made him more open to the Jesus myth theory. After reading Doherty, Carrier concluded in 2002 that we must entertain the plausible possibility that Jesus did not exist. There's your argument right there. He can't even argue against it. Totally. At this point, now watch what happens. After completing his doctoral thesis on the intellectual history and role of the scientists within the early Roman Empire, Carrier received his doctorate in ancient history from Columbia University, which limited academic jobs available. Following the outbreak of global financial crisis in 2007, he turned to his fan base and proposed a research project investigating the historicity of Jesus in order to help pay off his student debt. That's all. These guys create these things. They find a bunch of idiots, like we find over there on the HOK, who wants to eat up some conspiracy theories and rhetoric. And so you find these guys, in order to make a buck so he can buy himself a ham sandwich, they come up with these wild ideas. About Christ not being a historical figure. Let me go down here. Carrier's appeal was answered, and he received a total of $20,000 in donations administered by Atheists United as a charitable research grant. This resulted in the publication of 2 works. Now you got to come up with something because he just took these folks' money. Now you got to create some shit. Proving History, Bayes' Theorem, and the Quest for the Historical Jesus. Now, if you don't know what the Bayes' Theorem is, it's actually a mathematical equation. We'll show you how ridiculous this is, right? That he tries to use to prove whether or not a historical person exists or not. It is, as Anquest says, it is a well-organized lie. He says, and on the history of Jesus, while we might have reason to doubt, as well as 2 related journal articles, right? He had to pay up. He had to produce for that 20 grand that he got. In 2008, Carrier was invited to partake as a fellow in the now defunct Jesus Project, chaired by R. Joseph Hoffman. As his inaugural meeting, Carrier presented his criticism for the current criteria used within historical Jesus research, along with his case for the use of Bayes' theorem. Watch this, a methodology he would further advocate in 2012 with Proven History, and then later apply on the historicity of Jesus in 2014. In brief, Bayes' theorem is a probability calculation that involves assessing the likelihood of an event based on conditions that might relate to said event, right? So this is a formula that he writes, the Bayes' theorem, a formula that he uses in order to calculate whether or not a person is historical. And the reason why this has been debunked, especially in regards to Richard Carey's work, because they had an actual study. They tried to falsify. They falsified this, right? They tried to falsify this to see if this Bayes theory that Carrier was using to solidify whether or not a historical event actually happened, to use it where he could prove was there a person was actual historical. They got a group of atheists together, and by using this formula, they gave them evidences of people, and they didn't give them their names, but they gave them all the criterias of these people, and they put it in this particular formula to determine whether or not these individuals, based on the historical events of their lives, whether or not they can be considered historical figures. Well, when they came back and said, no, based on this theory, these people can't be considered historical figures, guess who some of these people were? Alexander the Great, Adolf Hitler, right? So his theory began to fall apart. Because these are real historical people, people that we know existed, but based on Richard Carrier's flawed argument, based on the Bayes theorem, we know it's false. You can't use it to determine whether or not a person is historical or not. It's been debunked. And so we already at the 11:30 mark. I only wanted to do about an hour and a half of this. But let me get down into here a little bit. And just read something. Get down here and read something real quick. Here you go. Carrier's minimum hypothesis of historicity. It's a hypothesis, people. There's no evidence to prove this claim. Right? Carrier's minimal hypothesis of historicity. An actual man at some point named Jesus acquired followers in his life who continued as identifiable movement after his death. This is the same Jesus who was claimed by some of the followers to have been executed by Jewish and Roman authorities. This is the same Jesus who some followers soon began worshiping a living God or a demigod. Carrier's minimum hypothesis is a myth. At the origin of Christianity, Jesus was thought to be a celestial being. That's false. That's false. Like many other celestial deities, this Jesus communicated with his subjects only through dreams, visions, and other forms of divine inspiration. Where did he get that from? Where does he get that from? He didn't get it from the scripture. He didn't get it from the Bible. Like some other celestial beings, this Jesus was originally believed to have endured an ordeal of incarnation, death, burial, and resurrection in the supernatural realm. Where did that happen? As with many other celestial deities, an allegorical story of this same Jesus was then compared and told within the sacred community, which placed him on earth in history as a divine man with an earthly family, companions, and enemies, complete with deeds and sayings, and an early depiction of his ordeals. Where did you get that from? Subsequent communities of worshipers believed, or were at least taught, that this invented sacred story was real and either not allegorical or only additionally allegorical. He's completely ridiculous. He's completely ridiculous. Like, again, absolutely, fam. Like, Sanchez is the worst with this, bro. He's the worst. He's the worst of them all, bro. But he's no different from he's really no different from Chris Harris. They're doing the exact same thing. They not on two opposite ends of the spectrum. These guys are with the same tomfoolery, with the same buffoonery. This is what's going on here. And all these guys are nothing more than pseudoscience and fringe theorists. That's it. And we keep giving them credence as if they're more than what they are. They're nothing more but liars. That's all they are. Because they present this stuff as truth. Nothing more than truth, man. And that's it. So, man, we got to really start, man, digging into these cats, man. And I'll be back, bro, probably later on this evening. Most High will. And bringing out some more information, man. So look for the notification. We're going to really get it in, bro. Because I have a whole presentation myself prepared on this. I'm going to show you the origins of these dying and rising savings things. I'm coming at all of their arguments, their heavy arguments, not running from any of them. All of their heavy arguments. Most of them are already addressed in various discussions or debates or whatever. But I'm coming at all their arguments, every last one of them. Every last one of them. I'm going to show you where they got it from. I'm going to show you how they twist it around. I'm going to show you how they use it to manipulate the people, and some of them for money, for financial gain. I'm going to show you this. But again, shout out to Judah Nass and Torah Knights. Shout out to Stefan P, man. I appreciate you, man. Shout out to Sick'em Dog. Shout out to you, fam. Shout out to Yasan. I see you, family. Salute. Shout out to you, Prince of Yahweh. I'm going to be back on later on, bro, this evening, fam. We're going to do War Machine Reloaded on some of these things, man. Shout out to JJ7000, man. Appreciate you, fam. Shout out to Queen Karima in the building. Lions Den on deck. Shout out to Shaka Okili. Shout out to you. Most High bless. Most High bless. Most High bless. Shout out to the mighty Hebrew. Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism has risen worldwide. Shout out to the mighty Hebrew in the building. Shout out to you. It's our elder. Shout out to Nyame. Peace to you, family. Shout out again to Leonard De Yehuda. Shout out to you, family. It's always a pleasure to have you in the building. Grace us with your presence. Shout out to Florida Don. Shout out to you. Shalom. Shalom. Peace to you, fam. Again, KOT. Peace to you, fam. And hallelujah. Shout out to Marquise, the Good Samaritan. Shout out to you, fam. Shout out to you. I gotta rinse some of y'all up over here, man. I gotta rinse some of y'all up over here. Let me rinse some of y'all up over here, man. Let me see what I can get this thing going, man. Let me do this real quick, man. Appreciate you, y'all, son. See if I can rinse some of y'all, man. I'm gonna be back this evening, man. Shalom, zero. Peace to you, family. Let me rinse some of y'all up in here, man. Yeah, peace to you, fam. Dre Theo, shout out to you, Art. Hey, man, the deep brother right here, man. I hope to have Dre Theo on the show, man, at some point, so we can discuss some of the knowledge, man, he been sharing with me, man. He's a deep brother right there. Deep brother right there. Deep brother right there. He got something new and fresh, man. Shout out to you, brother. Let me rinse some of my family up in here, man. Rinse some of my family up in here, man. I think Marcus, I got you.
Florida Donna, you would be so willing. Who's a moderator, man? My family wrenches up in here, man. Appreciate y'all, man. Where my man at? Where my man at, man? Where's my man? Where's my man at? I don't see. There you go, Inyame. And shout out to I Am John. These YouTube streets are full of dabblers in mysticism. Facts. Facts, facts, facts. Facts. He said nothing's wrong with exploring friends' theories. It can inspire new ideas. Just don't turn it into a Sanchez. Oh man, bro. That's hilarious, man. That's hilarious. But hey, man, we're approaching up on man 11:45 mark, man. Again, I want to say, man, give all praise to God, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, man. We're gonna be back, man. We're gonna be doing this more often, man. But I'm gonna be back this evening, so y'all look for the notification, man. I'm gonna be back this evening. I'm gonna open up the panel, man. Hopefully, we get some people on to mix it up. If not, I'm gonna be going back in again, man. And as you see, man, I'm gonna be dealing with these pseudo scholars, bro. I'm gonna get at it. Just show you where the information is, because oftentimes we go on their platforms and we can't get this in depth in the information and show you what we're actually up against, what we're actually proving and showing where they're getting these arguments from. They're not as intelligent as you think. I'm not saying that they're not smart brothers. I'm saying they're not as intelligent as you think. You feel me? They're just not as intelligent as you think. So again, peace and blessings to you, fam. And